So time then for the press preview. We're going to take a first look at Monday's front pages, and tonight we'll see what's making the headlines with Natalie Fahy, the editor of Nottinghamshire Live, and Annabel Denham, Director of Communications at the Institute of Economic Affairs. A very good evening to both of you. We'll speak in a moment after we've had a look at the front pages, starting with the FT leading with the G7 summit and a move by leaders there to stifle the Russian war effort in Ukraine by imposing a price cap on Russian oil. Meanwhile, the Metro reports on how those leaders have been mocking Vladimir Putin over photos of him showing off his physique. The headline there, "The Fool Monty." The Eye says the G7 leaders are trying to show some unity on international matters in the face of their own domestic political troubles at home. And The Guardian reports how Boris Johnson urged them not to give any ground to Russia on Ukraine. While the Mail has an investigation into fraud and reveals that Britain is now the crime world's capital, with £3 billion worth of cons being committed a year. The Sun leads with news that an investigation is to be held into millions of euros in cash allegedly given to Prince Charles by a Qatari sheikh. Buckingham Palace has already said that the money was given to charity and that all the correct procedures were followed. Fightmare, The Star pictures a brawl that broke out at a crowded airport after passenger frustration with staff at delays and cancellations boiled over. And don't forget, by scanning the QR code that you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you listen to us discussing them. And to discuss them, I'm joined tonight by Natalie Fahy and Annabel Denham. Great to see you. Lots to talk about in Monday's papers. Why don't we start with the front of The Guardian, Natalie? Do not give ground on Ukraine, the Prime Minister tells leaders. G7 leaders, of course, have lots of pressures at home, not only from political opponents, but also their public. President Putin, though, of course, has no such issues, does he? He can do what he likes.
Well, no, not quite. I mean, that's one of the top things on the agenda at the G7. So obviously the G7 world leaders are gathered in Bavaria for a few days to discuss many items on the agenda, which we're probably going to go through tonight because they're all over the front pages. And what The Guardian seems to be focusing on is this sort of posturing that Boris Johnson's doing, trying to give over this image of a strong leader. I won't bow down to what Putin wants me to do. If I'd been sort of bowing under the pressure of backbenchers, Putin would have been able to do whatever he wanted. So, you know, he's doing a lot of talking, a lot of strong words coming out from Boris Johnson, which are on the front page of The Guardian there.
Yeah, I guess the problem, Annabel, is that it's been a very united front so far, hasn't it, in the war that Ukraine and Russia are having. But cracks are beginning to show, particularly with France and Germany, who are understandably concerned at the huge cost of helping to send arms, but also the cost of sanctions.
Absolutely. You know, when Vladimir Putin embarked on this war, I think it's safe to say that one of his objectives was to stoke division among the Western alliance. And of course, certainly at the beginning of the conflict, the absolute opposite was happening. We saw an enormous unification and unity among the West, and they were very singularly minded when it came to imposing sanctions. A lot of these nations went a lot further than many people were anticipating, including introducing measures that represented acts of economic self-harm in Ukraine's interests. So certainly that was the narrative earlier on in the Ukrainian conflict. But I think now, as you say, the cracks are beginning to emerge. I share, of course, Natalie's cynicism over Boris Johnson's rhetoric over the last day or so, trying to position himself as a bulwark against backsliding by the US and other Western nations. And this is, of course, a position that has paid off back home with the Prime Minister, and he's got a lot of domestic strife to deal with when he returns to the UK after the G7 summit. But, you know, absolutely, the stakes really are getting higher the longer that this conflict goes on for both sides. And I think the challenge really is that, you know, since the end of the Second World War, since 1945, we we become used to the idea of decisive military outcomes in Europe. One side wins, the other side loses. But what we're seeing in Ukraine is a more protracted and drawn-out conflict that could last for, a year, perhaps many more. And that's something that Western leaders are going to have to come to terms with. And I think we can expect that they may not be showing such a unified front in the months and years to come since the beginning of the war.
Well, of course, that's Ukraine's biggest fear, isn't it? That if we don't keep up that pressure, if we don't keep spending a huge amount of money sending arms, and if we don't keep up pressure with sanctions, then the war will go on for longer, and we may even have a bigger European war down the line. The Financial Times says G7 aims to hurt Russian war chest with price cap on crude exports, and this is one of the things they're going to discuss, isn't it, in Bavaria, the possibility of putting a cap on Russian fuel.
Yes, that's right. I think that question was aimed at me. So the Financial Times is leading on a price cap on crude exports. So the idea being that obviously Russia can't sort of boost its war chest with the money that it's getting from this. So this is going along with a lot of other sanctions that have been put in place. For example, gold imports now being banned, and the sort of financial ones that we saw right at the beginning of the invasion as well. So the EU has already agreed to phase in a ban on seaborne Russian oil shipments. And the UK is aiming to ban Russian oil imports by the end of the year. So they're really trying to hit Russia where it hurts. Will it have an effect? Well, not sure. The consequences could be quite bad because obviously then we could be cut off from the oil, which is not exactly what we want. So it could backfire, and it's obviously a very delicate balance there that these leaders are trying to strike.
Yeah, front page of the Annabel, leaders seek united front away from turmoil at home. How successful do you think this G7 summit's going to be, and how successful will the NATO meeting be in Madrid?
Well, I think I'd greet both with a dose of scepticism. I'm afraid, obviously the I newspaper is focusing on the unity among international leaders and the contrast with how they are presenting themselves on the world stage compared to the enormous domestic pressures that they are facing. Of course, Boris Johnson has Tory rebels plotting his demise, potentially changing those rules around votes and no confidence so that they can have one sooner than 12 months from now. Macron has lost control of the French National Assembly just months after being re-elected as president. And of course, alarm bells have been ringing in the ruling Democratic Party after Biden's approval rating fell below 50% last August. His popularity is by no means guaranteed. So I think that there's, a real contrast there between how these leaders are looking and how they are presenting themselves at the G7 summit compared to the strife that they are facing back home. As I say, I don't expect that a huge amount is going to be achieved at this G7 summit. Certainly last year's didn't lead to lasting change. So as I say, a bit of scepticism really over what's going to be achieved.
OK, well, Natalie, you touched on this earlier. It's on the front of the Metro. We've been running the footage tonight as well. When these G7 meetings happen, the cameras are allowed in for 2 or 3 minutes right at the start of the talks before the real business gets underway. Then the cameras are ushered out and they start their discussions. But sometimes I wonder if they forget that the microphones are on as well, because there was quite a lot of dark humour, wasn't there, poking fun at President Putin.
Yeah, it was really odd, actually. And like you say, I think maybe they forgot the microphones were on. I'm not sure. Or it was kind of that awkward banter that you get when you haven't seen, work colleagues from around the country for ages, and try and break the ice at the beginning of a meeting. Or should we take our jackets off? Should we take our clothes off? And then Boris Johnson said, well, we need to get our pecs out to show that we're stronger than Putin. Because obviously, as you can see on the front of the Metro there, they're referencing that famous picture of Putin when he was riding topless on a horse. So it was just all very odd and maybe slightly inappropriate considering what's going on. Very strange. And when you look at the pictures from the G7, there's some odd ones of Boris grimacing. Nobody's wearing a tie. I know it was really hot. And is Ursula von der Leyen wearing trainers there? I'm not sure. It looks a bit like it. So there's some odd stuff going on, but maybe they're trying to make
Yeah, the Metro describing President von der Leyen as straight-laced as those jokes were being made. Let's move on to a different story, shall we, Annabel? It's on the front of the Sun. It was an exclusive on the front of the Sunday Times earlier today. This is the rather bizarre story, isn't it, of Prince Charles receiving €3 million in a suitcase and in Fortnum & Mason carrier bags. I mean, it's the detail that's so strange, isn't it? These allegedly gifts to charities that the Prince supports from a sheikh.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the details, and look at the language in this article. The money that's been bundled into a holdall, suitcase and Fortnum & Mason carrier bags, even if nothing untoward was occurring. And today's Sunday Times made clear that there was no suggestion that the payments were illegal. It nonetheless, it looks a little strange that was the method of delivery, and it's quite something that this is being splashed on two national papers 2 days running. We've now got the probe. The charity watchdog is going to be investigating the €3 million in cash that was handed to Prince Charles. And I think the wider concern here really is that the transition to Charles as king is going to be difficult enough without stories like this emerging. And now you've got this idea that the cash is being shoved into suitcases. It's unsurprising, really, that a probe is ensuing, and that this is a story that looks like it's got legs.
Yeah, it goes back to 2011, between 2011 and 2015. Clarence House saying that all proper procedures were followed. OK, thank you both for the moment. Coming up after the break, more from the papers, including this story. It's on the front of the Daily Mail. Britain is a £3 billion fraud capital, is their story. We're discussing that and more in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. Part two of the press preview. Natalie and Annabel still here. Natalie, front page of the Daily Mail. This isn't a good story, is it? Britain's become the global capital of fraud.
Yeah, this is really shocking. It's a special investigation by the Daily Mail here, I think. And it's talking about, well, as you said, Britain's become the global capital of fraud. And losses amount to almost £3 billion a year. So what they're talking about here is the kind of fraud that's suffered by, predominantly elderly people, vulnerable people, people who try and scam you out of money over the phone, on the internet. I'm sure actually most people watching tonight, most of us have suffered something like this. Money comes out of your bank account or comes off your credit card, and you have to try and scramble it back somehow. If you're not digitally literate or you haven't got access to the internet, it's going to be incredibly difficult. You might not even realise that the money's gone missing. So it says in this article that most crimes aren't reported, people don't try and claim the money back. I think that's probably because it's so difficult and the process is so confusing. So, bad news, but I'm not really surprised to read that. But what can we do about it? Well, I think, banks need to step up and make the process simpler, basically, and credit card companies. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, and you're right. It's not surprising in many ways. I mean, even today I've deleted at least 3 or 4 scam emails. I've had 2 scam texts. I've not had a phone call for a few days, but they're quite regular. Do you get that as well, Annabel?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a tsunami of scams that come your way, and it can be very difficult for your average individual to identify them. And, this article points out that it's particularly the vulnerable and the elderly who are being preyed upon or who are being conned by these scammers. It's an absolutely horrendous story, perhaps considering our financial services firepower, the city's position globally. It's not altogether surprising that the UK is being hit particularly hard by this wave of scams, but nonetheless the sums involved are collectively absolutely enormous. And this comes just a couple of days after Which was warning of an increase in scammers impersonating energy firms to trick victims. So there's some detail there. as well, and not a lot to suggest that anything's going to be done to address it. And I think part of the reason that a lot of people don't report these things is they simply shrug their shoulders and assume that the police are simply too busy to deal with it, which of course, in many cases they are. So there's no obvious solution, like Natalie said, beyond what Natalie has said.
Yeah, I mean, well, they will keep trying. Front of the FT, Natalie, this is a story about windfall tax on energy companies. Just fill us in.
Yeah, well, this is about the controversial windfall tax that Rishi Sunak wants to introduce on energy companies and how that might affect investment in the future. So the story is about RWE, who is Germany's biggest utility, saying that they might reconsider the £15 billion they want to invest in the UK if this windfall tax goes ahead. So in a nutshell, the UK is becoming a less attractive place for energy providers to invest in. And, that could stop renewable energy projects going ahead in the future. It's all quite worrying, really. And I'm sure that's not what the Chancellor would want. So he's stuck between a rock and a hard place here, really. He wants to, help people, but at the same time, investment could not be forthcoming because of this. So a bit of a worrying situation there.
Annabel, a thought from you on this?
Sure. Well, I think many economists warned before it was announced that there would be a windfall tax on oil and gas companies that windfall taxes are across the board a bad idea. I mean, for a start, companies don't pay taxes, people do. So windfalls reduce the dividends paid out to company shareholders. And these companies aren't owned by fat cats, but by all of us, or many of us, through pension funds and insurance firms. And they hurt consumers by stifling competition, but the other argument against them is that they risk a decline in investment. Few investors are going to put funds towards an industry that is subject to an unstable tax policy.
BP weren't fully opposed to it, were they?
Well, I suspect that BP were triangulating, and in fact, there were announcements in the days after Sunak made that announcement that there would be some kind of decline in investment. As I say, there are a few investors who are going to want to put money towards industries that are operating under unstable tax policies. And of course, the other side to this is that the idea that the government has the wisdom and the insight to determine which businesses are making excessive profits and to tax them differently. And if these firms are getting a windfall one year but are not making a profit in subsequent years or running at a loss, does that mean the government will offer them a rebate? So I think it's a very bad policy, a messy policy, and not a road that the government should be going down at all. OK, all right.
Let's end on, as The Guardian puts it, a little bit of disco joy. Diana Ross has been wowing the crowds at Glastonbury, Natalie.
Yeah, excuse me. Doesn't she look absolutely fabulous there? The outfit, the sequins, the feathers, the headdress, absolutely everything. So she was playing in the Tea Time Legends slot, which everyone absolutely seems to love. I've never been to Glastonbury, but I have watched some of the performances. And people are getting quite emotional about it. It's been 3 years since Glastonbury's been on. I watched some interviews of people talking about Diana Ross's performance. A woman was crying because she loved it so much. So she really connected with the crowd. And I think she came out with a line of something along the lines of, I love the idea of singing in the daytime because I can look into all of your eyes. And you can just imagine everyone going, oh, wow.
I know, she was great. She was great at the Jubilee concert as well, wasn't she? Just fantastic. Thank you both very much indeed.